Welcome, everybody. My name is Rob DiCesare. I'm from the Galahad Group. And today we have a great panel discussion with a great panel. We're going to be talking about operationalizing machine learning and joining up things like data strategy and model development across an organization. So I'm honored to be sitting here with a great panel. Data scientists, data engineers, analytics interpreters, delivery, and all of the above. They've done it all. So hopefully you can benefit from their experience today. So let me introduce the panel to start. To my left is Aditi Baker. She's a vice president, head of pricing and portfolio analytics, primary casualty at AIG. And next to her is Aditi Ghosh, who's senior director and lead the Financial Services Innovation Labs at Publicis Sapient. Next to him is Rajiv Sambayal, who's Director of AI and Innovation at Bank of New York Mellon. Naranjan Thomas is General Manager, Developer Platforms and Solutions Engineering at Dow Jones. And Sushil Thomas is VP of Engineering and Machine Learning at Cloudera. So we've got a lot of great experience up here. So I have just a few questions I've prepared, and we'll just go round robin and let the panel just sort of freeform as soon as we get going here. So, okay, so to start, we'll start with more of a higher level picture. And the first question is, Aditi, I'll direct it to you. What are some of the biggest AI machine learning breakthroughs that you're witnessing in business today that probably weren't possible 10 years ago?
Thank you, Rob. Just to start off, in the insurance sector, I think digital advancements in AI and machine learning is fueling transformations on many different operational fronts. So claims analytics, fraud analytics, risk pricing selection, customer service. But to talk about breakthroughs, some of the neat breakthroughs, and I'll probably leave you with a couple of examples. For example, now you can take pictures of car damage on your iPhone and get an AI-based estimate of damage and repair costs. Or let's say the ability to deploy artificial intelligence on data points and extract key building features and surrounding features that you can then incorporate in the modeling of the impact of catastrophic and attritional loss events, or even reduce, let's say, inspection costs in property insurance. So those are just a couple of examples. But just from a very broad perspective, if I have to leave you with one thought that's very promising, that is the role of insurance is changing from just paying for claims after they happen to now detecting and mitigating risk before they happen. And I think that's quite powerful. And with that, I'll ask some of my other panelists what their thoughts are.
Hello. Okay. I just want to show you can hear me. So I think, especially in the last 10, 12 years, right? So if you look back, right, from 97 when IBM's DeepMind, defeated Gary Kasparov, and to today, right? So there's been a lot of changes, right? But I think in the last couple of years, I would say the major things, at least from my perspective, which have really moved financial services are, I would say three things. Like one is the computation power, right? I know it's not directly tied to AI ML, but that is the one which is driving a lot of ML which we are doing today, especially around predictive analytics and things like that, right? So the things you can run with GPUs wasn't there like 10 years back, or it wasn't easily accessible, right? It was research domain, so that's one. The second is, I think, which is hugely, tremendously important is NLP, natural language processing. It's become a first-class citizen now, right? So a lot of research started with image processing and image next and all that, right? So having NLP available, become a first-class citizen has changed a lot of things, right? How we can operationalize these things. And the third thing, I think, is availability of open source, right? Because I think that is the thing which has really democratized the AI ML, right? So it's no longer a research thing where you have to collaborate with either Google, Microsoft, or Amazon and figure out how things work, right? So availability of a lot of open source, right? And that's really changed things.
And I think these are really great examples. In my mind, almost the biggest breakthrough is how normalized it's become to use AI and ML within your business. You're almost at a place now where if you're not doing it, you're falling behind and you're losing out to your competitors. Where, say, 5 years back, it used to be really special that you were doing something that sounded like AI and ML. Now it's like, okay, you have 10 models in production, you have like 2,000 in the pipeline, you have all these production level issues of how do you operationalize this. But like just that we are there now just shows how much we've progressed over the last few years.
One thing I would like to add is with the advancements made over the last few years, here's an interesting perspective. In my opinion, in the next 20, 30 years, the best producers of apps are going to be people from the liberal arts. So we're getting to that stage where you have everything in place, apps, solutions, which can be stitched together, and really powerful, impactful solutions can be made by people with liberal arts background who use their background imagination to come up with new solutions. So, and that's already starting. So for me personally, I'm very excited with that trend.
Yeah, Adi, staying with that thought, a follow-up question then. How is leadership's perspective then changed in terms of investing in machine learning and data-driven strategies? And then how do they want to measure the success of those things? Perspective on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think if I just step back 4 or 5 years ago, I think the journey was like from an exec leadership perspective that, hey, I got this vendor or this consultant or somebody came up and this is going to be like game changing. We're going to develop something. We're going to pull together 6 data scientists, lock them in a room with business and come up with something which will totally change the game. And you use very beautifully curated training data sets, which produces mighty results. And then you say, next year, I'm going to take this to production. And it bombs massively because you do not have beautifully curated data sets in real life. So I think that led to a lot of disillusionment. I think the journey from an exec leadership perspective is, which I believe to be progress, is that there is no silver bullet, that this is an incremental set of jumps which we need to take, but these jumps need to be governed, right? So hence I see a lot of C-level as well as D-level folks now talking about in an organization the need for doing platform thinking, being able to create that platform to allow data scientists to experiment. And I think Rajiv was mentioning about computational power, just being able to strip those pieces which include like ML ops, data science, data governance, and stitch it together.
Yeah, I think, so for Dow Jones, we obviously are a news gathering and essentially a research organization. So, we're the publisher of the Wall Street Journal, so we use data extensively within our business, audience data and other data sets we procure, in addition to producing our own data products, which we make available through our developer platform to enterprise customers. And so for us as an organization, I think what we're starting to see both within our own company and within our client base is really this top-down, bottom-up approach. So I think technology influencing culture is more and more pervasive, as you just mentioned. And I think it's, that experimentation is becoming more prevalent. I think in our own business, we see it in all parts. So from journalists working in our newsroom and the application of artificial intelligence to automate the research process, to break the next scoop or to find that hidden insight, right through to some of our researchers within our regulatory compliance part of our business who are trying to find, trying to resolve entities to identify, bad actors that we then serve up to our customers in data sets that we make available. So that pervasive culture, bottom up and top down from the executive, I think is more common today than it's ever been.
Okay, I told you they were great. So next question for Rajiv. What are the main success drivers that make the difference between analytics for knowledge versus analytics that's actionable and implemented?
So I think the way I see it, or the way I've seen it, so there are a couple of things. I think before anyone jumps on to picking up AI ML, which is a lot of like buzz these days, right? So I think the couple of things you need to go through. The first thing's you need to have a right goal or right use case, right? So you need to start with that, right? So if somebody is coming to you saying that we need to do AI machine learning, and then you start and produce a model, like something is wrong there, right? First of all, I don't know how you got the funding to do that, right? So that's that'll be different. But you need to have a right business case and use case, which is in tune for an AI machine learning. Not every use case is a machine learning use case. It's not an AI use case. It could be just a bug somewhere in the application. Trust me, I've seen that, right? Cases coming to you, can you do machine learning over there? You can take 1 hour and fix a bug in the application. You don't need machine learning for that. So that's one. The second step is to have the data which substantiates the use case. So a lot of time you have use cases, but you don't have data, right? And machine learning, it cannot work without data. I think there are a lot of practitioners in the group, but everybody knows that you need to have the right data to work with that, right? And it is messy. You need to cleanse the data. You need to have it in proper format. So that's the second piece. The third piece is, or the third factor is, you need to focus on the outcome and not what the models are producing, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying precision, recall, FN score, accuracy, all these are not good things. They need to be there, but what are you, your focus needs to be on the outcome, whether it's revenue generation or whether it is efficiency or whatever it is. So you need to build from that perspective. I think if you have these three, at least in my experience, if you have these three things lined up properly, that would generate the business value you are after.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. At Cloudera, we have like a product that we sell for machine learning where you can have data scientists collaborate together. But we also have a set of services engagements which we found were very necessary to make sure enterprises are successful as they start over here. As with any new technology, there's a definite curve in terms of where enterprises are across, what they want to do with data and how advanced they are. And in fact, in our services section, we have two distinct services. We do strategy advising, where we help you understand how to set up your organization so that you can be successful as you start doing machine learning. And then we do app development, where we explicitly split the services up into different phases. Phases 1 and 2 are requirements gathering, and many times we don't do phase 3 because we find through phase 1 and 2 that this is not a real ML problem or that things are not defined well enough, right? So just to echo what you're saying, like that happens all the time.
I would add to that probably 3 more elements. And first is the culture around expense management. So how does your business partners and management, how do they analyze their return on investment or on the spend on analytics? The second one would be kind of the culture and the hiring of the analytics team. So you kind of need a good mix of theoretical and pragmatic business expertise. And the motivation has to be based on deliverables and outcomes, kind of seconding that point. The third thing I found kind of a differentiator is the time to speed on implementation. So how nimble and agile is the business decision-making process, as well as the IT ecosystem to sort of get some of these machine learning models to the platform and to the deliverables you want to accomplish.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges which I always look at. I think to Rajiv's point and yours, Aditi, as well. I think it's the use case which you're identifying somewhere along the line during these conferences and these videos and promise of grandeur. I think somewhere along the line it has become, if you're using AI and machine learning, it's going to completely change the game. It's one jump which is like you're going to go to the moon right away, right? And I think it may not be that. I think it's more incremental, small steps. So if you implement machine learning into your, say, for example, LIBOR, for some of you with a financial services background would know, it's one of the biggest challenges facing the banking industry in the last many, many years, right? Would a success be if I were able to automate 20% contract generation? Is that success? Is it 30%? I tend to think unless it's 98%, it's not a success. So I think we all need to collectively work towards what's that definition of success. 30% automation is brilliant. Now, does it knock off against the costs which you incur? I don't know, but that's just something to think about.
Yeah, there's definitely I've noticed definitely a shift from solving the problem to getting it implemented and impacting the business. So that's a good thing. Ranjan, a question for you. Talk about identifying and leveraging new data to maximize the machine learning. How are you seeing that people are able to focus on that?
So I think the first question actually is it really new data or better versions of the data we already have, right? Data quality is something that is incredibly important to any organization, especially organizations such as ours. So trying to understand, right, how much incremental, valuable, additional data sets bring to our business. So within our own organization, veracity is probably our number one priority. Especially where our clients are depending on our data for material decisions. So whether that be a hedge fund looking to execute a trade with our newswires data, or a bank looking to decide to do business with an institutional customer based on a screening algorithm that we've developed. I think quality is kind of number one, but it really comes down to an organization understanding what gaps exist, whether they're gaps within the existing data sets that they have, and also understanding whether or not the silos within their own organization are the problem. So in some cases, data outside the organization isn't necessarily what's required. Sometimes the answer is actually creating metadata on the data that you already have within your business is where the real power is, right? Or correlating data sets that you already have. And so I think the term new data is fairly nebulous. And I think what it really comes down to, as we've covered already, is really people with an intimate understanding of the core business processes and challenges, making the decisions as to what the right data is. So I think the technology community, the onus is on the technologists in the room to essentially take the organization on that journey, because really I think those that understand the core of your business model are best placed to understand where those gaps are and actually to help break down some of those organizational boundaries.
And I think my answer would be very similar to yours, Niranjan. So here also, I think in the insurance sector, a lot of opportunity exists around improving the data quality and the metadata, so we can have well-connected data assets. And that kind of starts with sort of iteratively improving the data quality check at points of ingestion. Also sort of increasing the synergy, I would say, of the data quality between the risks when, let's say, we produce a policy or issue an endorsement, and when a claim happens. So again, that well-connected data asset and sort of marching towards that is of big value. And I would say the second element would be kind of increasing the granularity of the data so that we have like homogeneous variables that you can use to expand the width of your data set.
Yeah, and I think it's just this amount of new data collection which we do eventually translates, and Rajiv, we were referring to it, into like a massive, not a data lake, but a data swamp, right? I mean, it's all of these different groups which have taken data together, but are any of those data actually actionable? Do they talk to each other, right? And that's a massive challenge. So the first thing which I've seen a lot of folks do is just be able to just start ingesting a lot of the data and then struggle to connect these, right? I think that's where they need to hit the pause button and say that, do I have like an overall data strategy which actually connects with my machine learning and use case goals? And who am I servicing here? Am I servicing the entire organization? Am I solving a specific problem? I think there is an opportunity once the hype has died down, once people are realizing that here's a very specific business problem I'm looking to solve, there's opportunities for improvement there.
Okay. It's all about the data. We've said that forever. Back to Rajiv. Rajiv, are you, in terms of work processes, are you finding that now that we have this great machine learning and interactive AI and so forth, are you finding that work processes need to be revised or enhanced or changed to leverage some of this great science?
Right. So I think in any organization, I think that's a big debate, right? So AI, machine learning, you're bringing it in. What does it mean to the existing processes? Like, what does it mean to DevOps? What does it mean to development? What does it mean to engineering? What does it mean? So I think it's not about like going and just shaking the whole organization and like putting something new altogether, right? So it's a combination of moving those processes a little so that they can adjust to the AI ML operations. So ML ops is a big thing now, right? And rightfully so, because in the past, what was happening was, data scientists are building the models, right, either on their laptops. And I'm not talking about Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. I'm talking about 90% of the companies who do this work, right, or banks, insurance companies, and all that, right? So the data scientist is doing in the work on their laptops or VMs or desktops. They have a model, right? Somehow they were able to grab data from somewhere, right? Now all of a sudden, how do you actually take that pickle file and move it to production, right? So you go to your DevOps team, engineering team, and they have no clue about what that pickle file is, right? And like half of them have never worked with Python or Golang or any of this stuff, right? So I think it's more about educating those existing teams to be more knowledgeable about what AI and machine learning is and how to set up the pipeline, and working with them to set up these pipelines. So you don't have to go in and shift entire processes. You just have to work with the existing processes and make sure how you can actually fit the new models in there.
And I'll just say that this is the burning problem that we hear from customers today. Essentially, there's all the standard issues of the development lifecycle, the dev test prod, and so on that you need to do for machine learning. But more than that, there are ways in which machine learning is special. You need to have the right kind of lineage to understand how these models have changed over time, what features they've used, how you've trained it. In many or all industries, there's regulatory requirements that require you that these models be auditable, that there not be bias in there, that shouldn't be there. There's all sorts of monitoring you to do over time, which tends to be specific to the model. So there are so many new challenges with ML in production that are different from other apps in production. And I'll say this is the burning problem that we hear from our customers today, where 5 years back, there was a little more around what is the use case that I can use ML for. Now there's a whole lot of stuff that's understood there. There's a lot of incremental progress being made. But how do I move from 5 models in production to 500 models in production is all about ML ops.
In the insurance sector also, I would say that a very common challenge is often, especially in large organizations, is how do you connect these machine learning models with legacy systems? So whether the systems that ingest the data or provide an output, let's say, making a code or issuing a policy. And then the conversation happens around the upgrades and the workarounds. And if these are interim solutions, what is the long-term plan of action around these legacy systems? And it really becomes a balancing act between costs, timelines, priorities, and then how to minimize the disruption to the ongoing business process. So those are a lot of the considerations we have to think about.
I think Cecile touched on it as well, the whole concept of explainability and transparency in how models are built and deployed raises the question of governance, right? And I think at this particular time, in this juncture with the prevalence of the tools that are available, I think some of the ethical considerations are equally important as well. So some of the inherent biases that exist in models, and it's not that they will ever be removed, but as long as they're understood and everyone's clear on what the implications are, for example, in a claims decision, right, or if you're screening a customer or executing a trade, I think it's really, really important that there are adequate governance processes within the organisation, so the decision makers who are on the hook for the outcome are clearly aware of some of the operational processes that are changing within the organisation.
Yeah, I had this client come up once and say that with a lot of the investment decisions now being made by models and quants, what they were really missing is, to the explainability factor, the role of the great storyteller. In the days of yore, portfolio managers were amazing storytellers where they could explain why your numbers went up and went down because of this little coup which happened in South America, and they were able to translate these great stories with I think our investment models now. Those storytellers have gone away, but I know a lot of Wall Street firms are actually looking to bring them back just from that explainability perspective.
The translators, right?
What's that?
The translators between the ML engineers and the
Exactly. Yeah, and that's needed. And I think to that point of explainability, I think it's just so important. It's about responsible movement forward. Taking a laptop, using some data, and being able to produce a result is very different from when you adjust the hyperparameters and the investment decisions go like completely different from what you predicted yesterday. That's something which is dangerous and irresponsible, especially in the financial services area. So it's very important to think platform, being able to inculcate the best practices around an ML ops, and enable data scientists to do what they do best, right? Do intensive data computations versus having to worry about a bunch of stuff. So, and it's especially important now from an explainability perspective, because when you're launching digital products and new age products, you got to play this back to the regulators as well. And you were mentioning that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that. It's not even a matter of whether you want to do it. You're going to have an auditor in your office asking you to prove that this model doesn't have the bias it shouldn't, right? And so it's much more than a good practice for you to do. It's critical, and it's important part of the entire story.
Okay, great. I'm going to open this up to the panel. So a question that I get asked all the time, and put yourselves in the position of a CXO, and people are always asking, are we better having one centralized data science AI team, or are we better having experts in data science and machine learning throughout our businesses?
Okay, I'll start. So I think it's not a black and white answer, right? So it's not a prescriptive answer saying that do center of excellence, but don't then federate it. So I think it's a mixed model, and you have to figure out what works for which organization. If the organization is big, medium, small, right? So from my experience, I think it is a centralized federated model. So what I mean by that is, so you need to have need is not the right word, but I think if there is a central team which acts like a center of excellence, which is providing the platform, the libraries, the model governance, and things like that, right? So as long as you have the frameworks, and then you can federate it out to the business units so that they can set up the teams. Because if you're a big organization, it's extremely, extremely hard to scale center of excellence unless and until you're planning to hire 300 data scientists in one organization. So you want to be close to the business, right? And that's my experience has been that you want to have a centralized function which provides this, and then federate it out to the business unit so that data scientists, data engineers, they're close to the businesses and talking to the business and handling their problems.
I think definitely being close to where the problems are best understood is incredibly important. But I think most organizations are their structure is a function of their balance sheet, and their structure is a function of how they manage risk within the organization. So I think that's a really important thing to understand when you're deploying change. I think there are probably some other waves of change within most enterprises that we've seen over the last decade. So whether it be cybersecurity or data advanced analytics, machine learning is kind of the next wave, effectively. And I think there's a lot of things that we can learn. So I think if you're evaluating your own organization, I think it's best to look at how some of those initiatives have played out, what's worked, what hasn't, and some of the unique aspects such as culture, how risk is managed, and actually how your balance sheet is structured as well.
Are you guys finding that data science executives now by default have become experts in information security and data privacy, or are those best left for the experts within the organization? What's your point of view on that?
So, I don't know, there might be some CISOs sitting there. So I think that's a wrong question. That data science, I don't think so, right? So information security, data privacy, it's a separate topic, and organization and people deal with it. So data science comes in, and data science it's not even executives, right? So data science teams, data scientists, data engineers, right? Anyone who touches the data needs to be aware of what they're doing, right? It's the PII information, critical information. Like, you don't want your credit card numbers to be floating around, right? So I think it's not that data executive or data science executives or data science teams own the information security piece. They're part of it, right? They absolutely are very much part of the entire information security, data security fabric.
And I think data information, data security, data privacy. These are such topics with such deep technical expertise that it's not really, we can't expect one person to know it all, but I think that education, that appreciation, that is increasing, that awareness, and it just can't be at the C-suite level. It has to be kind of a grassroots effort as well. And sort of that cultural awareness is very important.
And I agree, and I think my slightly different take on this is that being said, for us to move forward from a business perspective, I think that's where it's important that every time you use certain data, you're not having to jump through 20 hoops to ask, can you use that data? Are there 4 attributes which you cannot use? I think that doesn't help anyone. I think what's needed is from a CISO organization, and a lot of it is happening, to be honest, is clear mandates, and those mandates and those governance models being built inside the platform versus it being a case-to-case basis that, hey, xyz.xls, can I use that information? Because that's just not going to fly. So I think that structured thinking and that cohesive adoption is extremely key for the success of data science.
I hate to do it, but that's one of the reasons why if you use the Cloudera tools and it integrates well with the policies that work on your big data environment, like all of that works that much better. But on the other hand, it has to be organizational. It has to be pervasive up and down. There are so many attack vectors for how people can get things out that you don't want out of your organization. There are so many leaks we hear about every day, essentially, right, where massive amounts of information was leaked from organizations. And unfortunately, it's just like specifically in data science teams where their entire day-to-day is working with, in many cases, sensitive data. It's critical that they understand up and down the stack how important all that is.
Okay. One question, I'll give you guys all a chance to weigh in on this. And so, tell the audience, in terms of next big area of disruption or breakthrough of machine learning and AI, what are you guys looking at, or what are you most excited about in your industry?
I'll go first. So just personally, flat out, that answer is, for me personally, as organizations grow larger, the biggest challenge they face is knowing their own organization. And yes, you could put together a presentation about what your mission statement is, but does that necessarily translate into your organization? And what I mean by that is the ability to connect the informal and formal networks of knowledge which your organization possesses. We are located across, like, and I'm sure I'm going to get this number wrong, 50 different locations. Yeah, okay. 50 different locations, and we've got about 80,000 people. And one of the biggest challenges we face is I could be sitting across the room and they've done a bunch of work on a specific ad campaign, or they might have worked on some specific client or a skill set, and I have no idea. So I think one of the things which I feel is going to happen over the next couple of years is, and we already see that with a lot of our clients, is building this enterprise skill inventory of who you know, who are the connections. It's almost like a LinkedIn on steroids for your own organization. And that's going to end up being a very powerful tool for your C-level suite to understand that in terms of your goal and mission statement, does it necessarily translate into the skill sets you have, the people you have, their perceptions, their emotions, whatever. So that's a very, very important initiative, and one which I'm really excited about.
I think on top of some of the initial answers to the first question, a different perspective is our customer landscape is changing. So when you think about commercial insurance, the chemical manufacturing plants, right? You have robotic process automation coming in everywhere, driverless cars, right? So these are the things that are going to change our insurance customer landscape and risk landscape. And in insurance, we have to kind of think about the solutions to support that kind of an economy and next generation of risks, if you will.
I think from a breakthrough perspective for Dow Jones, one of the key areas for us as an organization, one of the metrics for us in terms of adoption of AI and machine learning is really how pervasive it is in all of our products, and are we actually solving real problems for customers. So I think increased pervasiveness of machine learning within the organization. So we take a very much a decentralized approach. So there's some metrics around that. So I think that's one thing for us to watch, and where I think that will really manifest itself. And we've started to see elements of it. So some of our products, like Factiva.com, which is a global research database tool, we have employed recommendation engines and machine learning algorithms to serve up content in a very personalized way. Because we recognize we have a lot of data. Our customers don't necessarily need more data from us, even though they do value the data that we have. And so that's just one example of some of the innovations that we're pushing out to our various products. And we'd like to see that across more and more of our products. So we're doing that internally, and we're solving real problems for our customers. So.
Okay, well, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. Thank you for the panel, sharing some great insights and your experience. So have a great rest of the day, guys.